Hi, Alison here. I have a question for you today, which is, do you find it hard to say no? And since this is a channel all about chronic exhaustive conditions, I think it's probably a fairly safe bet that that is something that you struggle with, as I do. Still, I always have done. I am somebody who very much lived according to Rudyard Kipling's identification of what it means to be a man. If you can fulfill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, in other words, feeling that I constantly have to prove myself, that I have to be productive, and that I can't waste time on sitting around or doing things for myself. I have been that sort of person for as far back as I remember, but what I really remember about when it kicked off was when I became a mum. And I had a child who really didn't sleep much. Not really surprising when he had a mother who didn't sit still very much. But he used to wake me up at 5:30 every day. And those days used to go on until I collapsed on the sofa when he went to bed at about 8 o'clock. And then I would probably sit there and do emails or make shopping lists. And in between, it was just a constant activity, whether it was housework or work or travel, ferrying people around, responding to requests for help from friends and colleagues and family, or being on committees, or every moment of my day was full. And I increasingly began to get quite resentful about this. Even though nobody was making me do these things, I felt that I couldn't say no to people. And I actually took a pride in being somebody who was seen as being reliable and trustworthy and having a sense of duty and family. And yet I still complained and I still longed for that moment when actually I would be able to do what I wanted to do. And I could get to the bottom of my to-do list and feel that I was justified in doing something that was nice. And there were a couple of experiences that I remember towards the end of that 20 years or so of declining health and frantic activity. And the first was when a friend posted about me on Facebook. And I was the chair of our local community allotment, and we'd been putting a huge amount of work into getting it up and running, and particularly in erecting a colossal polytunnel. And she posted a picture of me taking part in this and described me as a workhorse. And she meant it as a compliment. And I had a really complex reaction. And my first reaction, I suppose, was, oh, that's really nice to be recognized. And the second one was, workhorse? Really? I don't want to be seen as a workhorse. Is that how people see me? Because as a child, I read the book Black Beauty. And in it, there is a horse called Ginger who is sold to somebody who uses him as a dray horse, hauling carts all day, not fed properly, flogged literally whenever he goes too slow. And later on in the book, the main horse in the book, Black Beauty, sees a horse like Ginger collapse and die in the streets in harness and is really distressed at the thought that it might be his friend. And I thought, that's me. I'm Ginger. I have harnessed myself to this cart and I really feel as if I'm being flogged in order to keep going every day. But who's actually doing the flogging? It was a really uncomfortable moment for me. But it still took quite a while before I understood what it meant and was able to do anything about it. The second experience was of being in church on a Sunday. And it had been really hard, even just to walk to the car to get there. And we sang the hymn, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind. And the final verse of that hymn goes, breathe through the heats of our desire, thy coolness and thy balm. Let sense be dumb, let flesh retire. Speak through the earthquake, wind and fire, O still small voice of calm. I couldn't sing it. I dropped my head into my hands and I just sobbed silently because I felt so humiliated being surrounded by people and just the horror of thinking that they might ask what was wrong because I couldn't tell them. So my shoulders were shaking and I was just streaming snot and tears. I didn't have a hanky. I didn't know what to do. So I just had to sit there in church with it pouring through my hands, over my face, until people went away and my husband was able to help me mop up and get home again. And the reason why that hymn hit me so powerfully was that it described exactly what I had been longing for so long. My life had increasingly become this hurricane I was caught up in of demands, as I saw them, of this need to say yes to everybody, and this really, really deep longing for that calm at the center of the hurricane, to find that space where I would finally be allowed to rest. And I did not see how that was going to come. And this came just before my crash, which meant that I actually had to give up work, and at one point was in bed for weeks on end, just completely unable to do anything. And during that period, I'd been seeing lots and lots and lots of specialists, having lots of tests, trying to work out what was wrong with me. Why could I not keep pulling my cart? And each one of them said, oh, good news. The tests are all clear. There's nothing wrong with you. And I increasingly felt that I was being seen as either lazy, I should just pull myself together and go back to work, or crazy, that it was all in my head. And I was really lucky is that I came across the chrysalis effect through a friend. And I found a whole new way of looking at what had gone wrong, what was wrong with me, which meant that I am now fully recovered. And it turned things on its head completely. So instead of continuing with this long trek around medical specialists to see which illness I got, what was it from outside of me that had gone wrong to break me so that I could no longer drive myself? And instead, I recognized that I was ill because of the way I'd been living my life. Not that it was my fault, but this was the water I swam in. These were the values that I had grown up with, that I should be reliable and dutiful, and hardworking and productive. And I should push myself and I shouldn't say no, because self-sacrifice is good. Hey, you get that every Sunday from the pulpit. And I was asked to write a timeline of the good things and the bad things in my life. And when I actually saw it laid out in front of me, all the things I'd done, all the burdens I'd carried, all the achievements, I just thought, maybe I am mad. And the madness was in the way that I'd been living. I thought if I'd looked at that for any other person, I would have had no questions at all about why they were on their knees and exhausted. It was just crazy. That was the craziness, not the having to go to bed. And going through the chrysalis effect and now working as a recovery practitioner and supporting people through their own recovery, I meet so many people who have lived in that way and have come to the same crash where their body has said, no more. You can't do this anymore. They've become completely overwhelmed. And there's a really interesting book that I read early on in my recovery by Gabor Mate called When the Body Says No. And he describes exactly this, is that symptoms are not an expression of what is broken in you, of something that from outside that's harming you. They are signs that your body is sending to you that you need to pay attention. You need to look after yourself. And I wasn't doing that. And Mate, over a lifetime of working with people with chronic illness, has recognized 5 key traits that he sees again and again and again in people who develop chronic illness like we have. And I'm going to go through these and just ask yourself how familiar these sound. So number 1 is an automatic and compulsive concern for the emotional needs of others whilst ignoring one's own. Number 2, a rigid identification with social role, duty, and responsibility. Number 3, being overdriven, externally focused, multitasking, hyper-responsible, all based on the conviction that you have to justify your existence by doing and giving. Number 4, repression of healthy self-protective aggression and anger. And anger is a healthy response when your boundaries are crossed. And if you are unable to say no, your boundaries are being crossed all the time. But it's likely that you're not allowing yourself to feel anger. That's not something that you see as being legitimate. And then number 5, harboring and compulsively acting out 2 beliefs. I am responsible for how other people feel, and I must never disappoint anyone. Certainly, those are 5 things that would absolutely describe me in my life leading up to my health crash. And these are things that I still have to work on today. I have to recognize and try and make choices around. So here are some questions for you. If this is sounding familiar, where are you on your priority list? And I'm willing to bet that you've probably got quite a long to-do list. Where are you on that? And how often is it that you don't do the things that you plan for yourself because something else comes up? This is something I see an awful lot in clients who will say, I'm going to have to take a break from my recovery work for a while because my parents are ill, my children need me. It's always somebody else's needs. And I say, this is why you're ill. This is the time at which you need to focus most on what you need so that you don't crash, because you're no good to anybody else if you're stuck on your back in bed because you've never said no. And then I would ask, when you say yes to other people, what are you saying no to in yourself? How highly do you value yourself? And that might be quite a painful question. And this brings us to Mate's view of busyness, this kind of driven workaholism, compulsive caring for others, is that actually it's an addiction. In the same way as alcohol or drugs or shopping, oh, so many of these activities, they are all self-soothing. They are ways in which we distract ourselves and manage to make ourselves a bit better from the emotional pain that underlies them. And Mate argues that we shouldn't be saying, why the addiction? Why can't I say no? But what function does this behavior serve for me? What is the pain underneath that it is soothing? And if you can begin to ask yourself that question, you're laying the foundations for actually making a really important change in your life and potentially being able to resolve some of your symptoms. Now, recovery isn't as simple as just realizing that you're getting it wrong and deciding to do something different. We know that willpower is a really lousy way of trying to change habits. Anybody who's trying to give up smoking or go on a diet will know that. And what happens if you just try to rely on willpower, saying, okay, I am going to stop saying yes to everybody all the time, is that you fail. And then you beat yourself up for failing and you tell yourself that you're useless and you spiral into an even worse situation. So I would say to you, if you really struggle to say no to other people and to say yes to yourself, then begin with some self-compassion. It's really important that you've even begun to understand that. And that's something that you can gradually begin to unpick. And there are ways of helping yourself to say no. And the first point is always recognizing those moments when you have a choice and taking your time to step back and do something different. It can help to use affirmations. So I remember one I was given was, today will flow as it should. I do not have to be perfect. And I would go around during the day going, I do not have to be perfect. I do not have to be perfect. And that sometimes will give me that space to say no, to step back. It is really difficult work, but this is the deep emotional work, that understanding of yourself and resolving some of those pain and the reasons why you've come to believe these things about yourself, that you're only worthy when you're working, when you're looking after other people, when you're saying yes. That's the work that will take you to recovery. And it's work that really needs support and help. And the perspective of somebody who is outside of your world, who can point to those places where you're doing things where, you know, when I looked at myself as that workhouse, you get those light bulb moments of, really? If anybody else was doing this, I'd say, yeah, you're crazy. So if you're needing help working through some of this, then please do consider going to my website and booking yourself on a half-hour free discovery call where we can actually talk through how I can help you. Because you don't need to keep saying no to yourself for the rest of your life. If you found this video helpful, please do click on like below and subscribe to my channel. You might also like to hop across using the links to my Facebook or LinkedIn pages where you'll find much more content.